Okay, we are recording, and I have my transaction coordinator on this video with me, Paris Ruffin. She is awesome. I have been working with her for, I believe, over 2 years now. Has it
Oh
been?
my gosh, it's getting there, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're coming to our 2 year. And I mean, she has helped my business so much. She basically handles all of the transactions when I have appointments. She gets my documents ready for me. And then when my client and I get a contract, she handles all the paperwork from then on. She also works with the title company, lender, and any third party associated with the transaction to make sure that the deal closes and that everyone gets what they need. And I mean, I just cannot tell you how much she has helped me with my business. She's helped me scale my business to the next level because all I have to do really is just talk to leads and get appointments and get listings and get buyers. And so I highly recommend her to any of you who find that you are not able to do it all. Delegate some things and let Paris help you. But today she's going to share a little of her knowledge of contracts and where to find them. And so, Paris, are you on?
I am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And just to kind of give a brief introduction about myself, like Carla said, she and I have been working together nearly 2 years. I feel like it'll be 2 years in January, I think. Um, but we work together, and as she said, we have successfully closed several buyer and sellers, as well as helped her get her business to grow. So that's the beauty of a transaction coordinator. And what I do differs depending on the agent, but for the most part, there are several things that stay the same. So I write offers, I write listing documentation. As Carla said, I communicate with the other parties or vendors relating to the contract. So that includes your clients, and that also may include their family members and others relating to the contract, as well as title, lenders and inspectors and various other people that are involved. So I will say I read a statistic somewhere, and it probably was maybe over a year ago, and I'm sure it's been updated since then, but the average agent spends between 10 and 19 hours a week on paperwork. And so if you think about that as a new agent, it's not that bad, just because you probably don't have much business going on at the initial stages. You're probably still kind of getting your feet wet, learning how to do things. You're probably working with some clients, but you don't really have too much on your plate. But like Carla, as an experienced agent, and you have a good book of business, you don't really have time to sit down and write an offer or create listing documentation. Even though it doesn't seem like it takes that long, sometimes it can be a daunting task, and finding email addresses and phone numbers to input on those forms and things like that can take a lot of your time. And it's not always worth it for you as an agent to be doing that work. So that's why transaction coordinators are great to have. And just to give a little bit more information about a transaction coordinator, it's different than having an assistant. A transaction coordinator is typically paid a flat fee per transaction. Myself, I only bill the fee if the transaction closes. So several times there are cases where a transaction doesn't close for whatever reason and for whomever's fault. And I don't think that's an expense that you should pay, because you also didn't get paid at the end of the day. So that's one of the beautiful things about a transaction coordinator. It's very different than paying someone a salary or an hourly wage to do the work. So that's one of the great benefits that usually a transaction coordinator will offer for you. But as I said, it's easier to use a transaction coordinator just because they have the time available to write offers and to get documentation prepared for you. So what we are going to do today is walk through not only setting up templates for your transactions, but the type of documentation that you need in your templates and how to prepare them and then send them to your clients. So I will go ahead and get started. Carla, if you have anything to add while I go through, please chime in. I know that you have some really good tips and information for agents as well. So
I sure will.
and get started.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so step one, I will say in setting up your transaction templates, I would say that most agents need at least 4 types of templates. And so that can be the following: a seller template, a buyer template, a lease listing template, and a tenant representation template. Now, there may also be some additional templates that you could be interested in depending on your line of business. So for example, if you work with investors primarily and you would like to have an investor specific template, maybe that differs from your seller template or your buyer template, you can set that up. You can also have a land related template if you foresee that you will be selling land or lots or whatnot that may be different from your other template. So if I don't go over something on this video, it doesn't mean that you can't have it available to yourself. It would just be something that you can set up in your own time. I typically don't use those type of templates, but if it's valuable to you to have in your business and every day, then go ahead and do that. Okay. And I will say it also doesn't matter what document preparation program that you use. You can use any that's available to you, whether you have to pay for it or it is free. But I will be walking through zip forms today just because Carla typically uses zip forms for creating those documents and forms. Sure. So some agents use Dotloop, and Carla and I use Dotloop to send documentation for signatures. Dotloop can be kind of tricky. You will have to upload your own documents into the system and then create it from there. But most of them work similarly. You can set templates, you can populate those templates to use for transactions and so forth. A really great one that an agent actually just told me about recently was Instanet. And I had no idea about it. I'd never used it. And just recently I started exploring it. And I think it's a great tool for newer agents who maybe don't want to spend the money on some of the other document preparation tools. But how you can get to that is through through Netris. Carla is a member of MetroTex, so she has the MetroTex access through that as her real estate board. But when you log into Netris, you will have your menu of options here available. And right on the right-hand side is Instanet. Now, if you are familiar with the transaction desk in the MLS system, you can kind of navigate Instanet the same way. So they are components of each other. So if you were to ever access a seller's disclosure in the transaction desk of a listing, you would be brought to a similar dashboard like this one. It's very easy to use. And on the left-hand side in the menu, you will see this little icon that looks like a document. If you click on it, that is called Instanet Forms. And so it gives you access to any document that you as an agent have access to depending on your board membership. So for example, Carla's a member of MetroTex, so she has access to MetroTex related documents. She also, and I believe everyone should have access as well, to the TAR documents as well as TREC related documents. So that's a really great tool, absolutely free from what I understand. And you can create a transaction, you can edit the form, and they also, which I was very impressed by, having a signature program as well. So you can add documents to it and send it to clients to sign. And I believe that's free also, but don't quote me on that one. Today, we will be using zip forms because that's what most agents use. And you can access it various ways. So you can get to it either through the MLS and your zip form login right here, or you can go to, I think there's also access on the TAR website. They have a button that you can click there, or you can type in the URL on your on your web address. And so to get started, navigate to the template menu. Again, depending on what program you're using, it works similarly, and you can also follow along either way. So templates, Carla already has some templates designed here, but for the purpose of today, we will create a new one. So I'm going to click New and give your template a name. I would give it something that's easy to remember so that you know exactly what template applies to that type of transaction. So for the purposes of today, I'm going to call this the seller template. And here you have a series of criteria that you can select. So I will select listing because it's a seller. Property type, again, like I was describing before, depending on the line of business that you'll be working in, this could be different for you, but for most agents, it will be residential. The agent status or status will always be agent unless you open a brokerage or whatnot, and you would select global or office. And the auto apply rules, I want to stop and take a second to talk about what that means. As you can see, there are some options here for you to select to automatically apply that template to any transaction that you create. Now, the bottom two selections are available for you. And if you want to apply that specific template to a new transaction, that would be every transaction that you categorize as a new listing, for example, you can select that radio button. Now, I wouldn't do that because it doesn't guarantee, or there's no guarantee, I should say, that every new seller transaction will be a residential transaction. If you happen to have a land listing come up, then you wouldn't necessarily need to select that template because you may have another template that applies. So it just depends on what you feel is best for you and going forward. So the bottom option is automatically apply that template to every new transaction. And again, I wouldn't select that because that may not be the situation that you're in. You may have a buyer temp or a buyer transaction that you want to start. And you don't want to apply your seller template to your buyer transaction because that doesn't help you. So I always leave it as do not automatically apply. If you want to change it, that's fine. Do it at your discretion. And just to let you know what this little bug means right here, apply template means that you can apply a template to your template. So where this can come in handy is, for example, if you have a buyer template already available and you are creating a tenant representation template, then I could see some benefit there because sometimes those documents are the same. So things that you would need out of a buyer template would be an IABS form or the buyer tenant representation agreement. Those are the same throughout those transactions. But if you do select that template option, you may have to go into that transaction and remove some of the documents because they're not all the same. So you wouldn't need a 1-to-4 contract for a tenant, and that's the difference there. So I would leave that blank for now and click Save. So that is going to create our seller template. So you see off to the left-hand side, that is the name of your template. Now we are going to add folders and documents to those folders. So here, I like to add subfolders within the template because there are different stages of a transaction. For example, I like to add a pre-listing subfolder. Also, I like to add an under contract subfolder because sometimes when you're going through the template folders, you can have a lot of documents available to you. And it's easier to get to the appropriate document if you give yourself a little bit of navigation in between. And the purpose of this video is to teach you how to save your time, as well as get things ready to go for when you need them. So if we can save some time by you not having to scroll through various documents, that's what we're going to do. So enter your pre-listing folder or subfolder. And then we are going to add the documents to that folder. Now, right off to the right-hand side is what's called the form library. Again, it's very similar to on Instanet when we looked just a moment ago. Depending on your membership to certain boards, you have access to various documents. So Carla, again, as a member of MetroTex, has access to MetroTex documents. She has access to NETRIS, TAR, TREC, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and HMS. So we can click all so that we can see all of the documents available to her. And then we will select those that are appropriate depending on the entity. Typically, you'll be using a TAR form or a TREC related form. Carla, are there any times that you use others or various different entities documents? So those that I feel should be included in a pre-listing folder, I will name off and add to this subfolder in just a minute. But Carla, I want you to chime in if there's something that I leave out or something that you like to have in that folder as well.
Yes.
Maybe I don't mention.
Okay.
Awesome. So I would say first is the information about brokerage services, and that's going to be your TAR 2501 form. You can either click the hyperlink to add it, or you can open the menu using the drop-down arrow to the right and add the form. There are also options available for you to do other things, but for today, we are going to do that. And we're just going to add the documents as we go, and then I'll open up some of those and show you sort of how we complete that documentation. But we are going to add the listing agreement, and I should have just typed in listing. Okay. So one of the difficult pieces of using the library is that you have to know what the document is called. So I will be offering a supplemental document that I'll send to Carla, and it will have the names of the documents, what documents should be in what folder, and what those are called, and various other things, so that you have that readily available for you. And again, depending on the type of transaction that you'll be doing, some of the documents may be necessary to have, some may not be necessary to have, but you will have those readily available for you at any time. Now, two of the documents that I'm adding right now are ones that we don't typically use, but it can be beneficial for you to have later on down the road. And those are the information from a HOA company, or association, I should say, or a mortgage company. So those can be beneficial. I don't think I've ever really used one of those in a transaction, but it can be valuable at some point, I'm sure, to have. Oh, there we go. Okay. Froze just a bit. There we go. Request for info from an owners association. And the final document I think is beneficial to add is the amendment to a listing. Now, you don't always want to amend your listing, and usually it may or may not be for a good or bad reason, but it's valuable to have in case you have any changes to your listing necessary. Okay, and if we navigate to our under contract subfolder, we can do the same. Now, there aren't necessarily as many options that are needed in this folder because as the seller, you typically aren't writing the offer and creating some of the addendums related to the contract, but it may be valuable for you to have some of these documents there. So an amendment is valuable for you to have in your under contract folder. I would also say a temporary lease may be valuable to have. depending on what's going on with your transaction, as well as an invitation to submit a new offer. Now, obviously, if you are under contract, you won't be asking to submit a new offer, but in order to separate it from the listing phase, I think it's valuable to have here. Okay, so going back to our pre-listing folder, I'm going to show you how I prepare the listing agreement. So the IABS is something that is very simple. So you're just data entering information specific to your broker and yourself. So I'm not going to walk through that one, but the listing agreement I feel is one that can be pre-filled to save you quite a bit of time and effort going forward. So various things on this form can be pre-filled for you. Example, broker. Your broker is not going to change because we all love Next Level and we love Joe and Carla so very much. So all of that information will stay the same. So you can enter that. That way, when you create a transaction, it's always there for you. Same thing with the address and so forth. You can put your phone number, your email address, and the office fax number if you would like. Property information, anything specific to the client should not be pre-filled because that information is going to change from transaction to transaction. Some agents like to have broker's compensation completed. If you know that you're an agent who may or may not discount your listings depending on the client or the situation, it may not be valuable to pre-fill this, but some agents can pre-fill that if they prefer. You can do your automatic 6% or 5% or whatnot going forward, or you can leave it blank, so you have that option. And if you keep scrolling, I always leave the other compensation blank and the fees or reimbursable expenses blank unless you have something that you like to put in here. So that could be something, Carla helped me out at, like a marketing fee.
So that would be if the client wants like newspaper advertising, for
Yep.
example,
Yeah.
and they're willing to pay for that, then you would put that in that that area.
Perfect. And I thought it's usually related to marketing kind of things. There aren't
Yes. Yes.
typically other fees that could be incurred in that way. So
Exactly.
that's a great place to put that there. Protection period, I always put it in as 90. You can input a different date range or range there for your number. But 90 is safe. That typically should not change, so it's okay to keep that as a number there. The county, you want to fill that in as the counties, oops, excuse me for that email, to be paid in cash or in whatever form available to be paid to the broker in X county. So I typically put Dallas or Tarrant, and I believe it typically should be filled with your broker location. Is that correct?
Yes. Correct.
Okay, thought so. So, of course, Arlington is Tarrant County, I believe, and Dallas just to be safe. You can input Collin or whatnot, depending on where you are located. Listing services, that is something that the client may want to fill out at some point. So I don't typically fill that in just because they may or may not decide that they want to list with the MLS or whatnot. Access to the property, if you're an agent who uses CSS, most of you will, then you can go ahead and enter CSS or centralized showing service and input the phone number. Oops. You will come to memorize that phone number. I have. Same thing with the key box. That is something more specific to the client, so you can have them fill that in. You can also have pre-fill the cooperation with other brokers. I believe some agents like to put 1% here and 3% for an MLS participant and leave the remainder blank, or you can fill that in if you prefer. Regarding intermediaries, I do not fill that in. Again, that's a client-related piece that you'll need to talk with them about. If they choose to allow an intermediary relationship, then that can be selected here or not selected. And if you keep scrolling, broker's authority, that should be filled out by the client depending on the situation, as well as the financing information here. Same with seller representation section. If there is anything that should be input, that is something that should be done at your listing appointment or meeting. And if you keep scrolling, special provisions, I will fill in any special provisions that you notify me of. So for example, if we are discounting the listing to 5% for whatever reason, and there is some specific information that you would like to input in special provisions, let's say that if the seller chooses to buy with you as well, you will discount the listing under that provision. That is something that I would put here. There are various other scenarios in which you can input something specific to explain further a need or something that is addressed in the listing agreement here. Addenda and other documents. A lot of agents don't select other documentation that is appropriate or that is included with the listing agreement. I always select the items that are necessary to have or that we expect to have in order to prepare a listing. So typically that's the seller's disclosure. If I know that the property was built before 1978 and that we will be attaching a seller's disclosure of lead-based paint, I will select that one as well. That's not something that you should pre-fill because not every scenario will include a lead-based paint addendum. You can also include the T47 affidavit if necessary. And down here, this is a really important piece that I want to address. Click O and select the checkbox here. And I would add, because I don't think that they have updated it, the authorization to furnish TILA and RESPA, integrated disclosures. That's a big one that you want to add with your documentation. Okay, so keep navigating toward the end. And again, you can select here that the broker's name will typically pre-fill because you have already completed it. You'll want to add your name as well, and the client's name once you have it. Now, a big tip for you guys going forward, and this is something that Carla stresses, is to get the information for the seller completed. We want a phone number and email address, 2 methods of contact for the client. And the reason is that you never know what method is best for the client, but it's beneficial to have both and to include it on your listing agreement so that if you needed to go back to it or your transaction coordinator needed to go back to it so that they can find another method of access, then that is beneficial to have as well. And you want that documented anyway for the transaction. Okay. So once you are all done, have everything ready, you can click save and go back, and I will show you how it looks when you create a transaction. So hover over to your transactions section, and as you can see, Carla has some transactions already ready. Click new, and we are just going to come up with a name. So we'll call it John Doe's transaction 1234 XYZ Street. We're going to call it a listing and residential property. Here's the apply template option that we talked about earlier. So we are going to find my seller template option, and here it is. Select. If you wanted to input comments, you can, but you don't have to, and click save. And so you will see that that transaction's been created, okay? We already have our folders or subfolders set up. So pre-listing, and we want to click on our listing agreement. I want to show you what it looks like now that it's been pre-filled. And as you can see, some of the information that we input is already there. So we have our 90 days, our county to be paid in, CSS, and so forth. So as you keep scrolling, that really simplifies the process. And the beauty of having those documents pre-filled is that now when you're in a pinch and it's, you have an offer submission due at midnight, and it's 11:39, and you just got back from showing properties and you made it home and got the kids settled and whatnot, now you can easily go into that document, pre-fill it. It's already pre-filled, I'm sorry. And you can input the necessary information and get it ready to go and send off to your clients as soon as possible. There's no wait, there's no hassle. You don't have to gather information. It's already ready for you. So that's a great, great thing to do for you to save you some time. So, and I kind of skipped over that really quickly, so let me back up. In order to send the document to your client to either review or sign, you can do a number of things. So in zip forms, there are various options within the folder you have available to you. You can send it for e-sign, you can send it via email to review, you can save it as a PDF or print it. Typically, because we use Dotloop, I will save the document as a PDF, save it to computer by clicking here, and it will download to my computer. I can upload it into Dotloop, prepare it for signature, and then go forward. I typically like to have Carla review the document, so I will do the same process. I will save it, I will send it to her in an email to review, ensure that everything is completed appropriately, that I have all of the terms listed as they should be, everything documented correctly.
Yes.
She will,
Awesome. And
yeah.
I love that. I love getting the documents. And she'll also just let me know, shoot me an FYI text saying, hey, the documents are in your inbox. And then so I just go and take a look at them. And I like that process. So it's very helpful. That process is awesome.
And typically the reason that I do that is because there may be something that I missed. She may have told me, that we wanted to add a lease back or whatnot, or there was
Yes.
a term on the contract that I didn't write in. So just having a second set of eyes is beneficial, and I think that's something that really works. And so I would encourage that if you do employ a TC or work with someone else, an assistant, whatnot, have them send a copy of it to you to review and make sure that it looks okay. Because we don't want to send it to the client and the client notices that there was an error, either with data entry or something that they already specified, because then that comes back and makes you look as if either you weren't listening or didn't pay attention or didn't care. So we want to kind of nip that in the bud if we can, by reviewing those documents ahead of time.
Yes, that's a great point. And also, in addition to that, sometimes the clients will call you and text and change things.
Sure.
And so sometimes you have, so it's just a good way a good process to have in place with your TC or your assistant, so that your client gets everything that they want, and you can make last minute changes and make your client seem like it's a breeze, because the whole goal is that your client should feel like the whole process is easy, quick and easy for them. And even if even if Paris and I in the background are running around crazy trying to get stuff done.
Absolutely. There are many text messages flying and many emails, but it
Right.
doesn't seem like that to the client. So that's the beauty of that review process. And the same thing goes if you are submitting an offer or even receiving an offer. It's helpful to have a second set of eyes to catch things in that instance. So again, I would say going forward, if you do work with a TC or an assistant, make sure that they send it to you to review. It's great that we all trust each other, and I love that, but a second set of eyes is beneficial. Okay, so like I said, I will save that as a PDF, and I'll do that now and finish. So it's popped right here into my downloads, and I will go to Dotloop to show you a little bit of what that looks like. If you don't use Dotloop or don't plan to use Dotloop, Dotloop is a process and a program that allows you to electronically send the documents to your clients. There are several of these platforms available, and some of them are HelloSign, DocuSign. The Instanet platform that we talked about has this capability. Again, I'm not sure if it's free, but I'm sure that it's included in your subscription or membership to your board. Don't quote me on that, but I can foresee that it's a free option for you. So what I do is create a new loop in that platform and name it the client's name or something specific to the listing, so that you are able to easily identify that transaction. Same thing for your agent. If your agent needs to go in, they're able to easily identify, or your assistant or whomever is able to identify the transaction by the name or title. And the beautiful thing about Dotloop is that they have the ability to either add a document from your templates. See, again, we have the templates option here. Browse for it on your computer or upload it via email. So I can, from my own email, upload the document using a link. If it gives me the link, yep. So I can copy this and put it in the to section of the email and send that specific document or documents into this transaction for this client. That is one of the great things about Dotloop. And I will go to my downloads and I will add the listing agreement. Okay. And typically I retitle it. Now I didn't do it just then. I either do it at the end before I get ready to send it, or at the beginning as I'm going through the documents. So I'll do that at the end. But you can navigate through and add, excuse me, initials or signatures for the client. So I will add myself, for example, as a client. Yep, and I'm already here. And I will just call myself seller and add person. So now when I send this, at the end, I click the save and share. I have created an email that will send to that client, and the client can go through and automatically sign, and I will receive notice of the signature once it's done, which is really, really great, so that you can keep up with the time frames and the timelines of when things are being done. So you'll go through and continue to add. As the agent, you can also add signatures for yourself. So I can either, as the TC, I can assign this to Carla to sign, or she can enter Dotloop and sign it herself. And so it gives her the option to sign now. And this is what it looks like when your client receives it. So if you haven't used an electronic signature program before, this is typically what it looks like. You will get a preview of your signature. You can click adopt and allow it to use that signature or initial as you go through and sign, or you can draw the signature yourself and adopt it. And so it will automatically place that signature on that form for you. Okay, and I'm not going to continue to go through because it's most of the same process, but just so that you can get a feel for that and adding your clients and so forth. And I want to make a quick mention, and this is something that, isn't typically discussed, but one of the great things about Zip Forms is that once you create a transaction, will populate your information here at the bottom of the form. So you can see it has the broker name and address listed here, Carla's name for personalization, the phone number or Carla's phone number as we input, and the name of the client. This is what we called that transaction in Zip Forms, and that has populated here. Again, not necessarily something that's a big deal, but it can be a bit of a personal touch to have for clients. Okay, and now we're ready to send. So I am going to, I said that I would do this. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back to my dashboard, and I'm going to rename the transaction. So I'm sorry, rename the document. So I'm going to call it listing agreement, and you can either add the client's name behind it or the property address. I like the property address so that I can keep up with it once I store it. Save. And so now I can share that document. Now myself is the recipient because I input my information, but you could here select your clients or additional persons that will need to receive that email in order to sign the documentation. And a big, big tip, I would add, if you are working with a TC or an assistant, I would add, or even yourself, if you're doing it yourself, I would add you as a recipient of the document. So Carla will be a recipient of the document as well, so that she can view it in sort of the same perspective as the client views it. And she would be the listing agent, view only. So Carla, how does that come across when you receive a copy of that? It looks sort of the same as how a client would receive it. You just don't have access to sign. Is that correct?
That's correct. I have access to view it, but not to sign it. So I like that.
Okay, perfect. And now if she does need to sign it, of course you can change the options available so that she can sign. A good thing about Dotloop is that they have the capability for a client to fill in documentation as well as sign it. So a big, big benefit that you can see through this is on the seller's disclosure notice. So that document needs to be filled out by your clients. Well, you can set it up in Dotloop or your electronic signature program or whatnot and format it so that they can not only select the boxes available. So we all have seen a seller's disclosure notice and it has check boxes for different sections to discuss the condition of the property, yes, no, or unknown. Well, there are some sections that also require the entry of information. So, for example, if you were to enter information about an HOA company or association, if there is one, you would need to enter the name of the contact, the association name, a phone number, and that's something that the client should be doing. And there are various other fields on that form that have to be entered as well with a text entry. So the beautiful thing about Dotloop, and I believe most other signature programs allow it as well, is the ability to fill in and sign. So not only can they sign, adding their initials and a signature, but they can complete those required fields that you set for them. Okay, and typically I add a little message. It changes depending on the client. So if it's a listing, I will say, typically I introduce myself as the transaction coordinator. I share a little bit about what I do in working with Carla and the client as a resource. And then I break down the documents that are included in the enclosure. So if I'm sending a listing agreement and a seller's disclosure and a TILA, because I have my listing package already prepared, I will discuss those documents, tell them exactly what it means, and share that they are able to sign or fill in and sign that document. I think it's beneficial to give a little introduction because many people don't have experience with those documents. As an agent, you see them every day, so you know exactly what they're for, exactly what they need, and what it means. But many of the clients don't understand what an IABS form is. So I would say just give a brief description of the document, something as simple as saying an information about brokered services form specifies the duties of the broker and the agent to you as a client, period. It doesn't have to be lengthy, just as long as you were able to easily discuss it. And then you can follow up with a phone conversation or email conversation with your client to further discuss that. Perfect. So once you have your text entry, and I'm just going to put text entry here, you will click share. And that will go to your client. So now you can see that it's waiting on me to sign. So if I were to go into my email, I would receive sort of a blurb about Dotloop, and Carla Johnson wants you to review and sign X document. It will also show what the message is that I typed in. So I will give you a little preview of what that looks like. Okay, and most of the signature programs are the same. So you'll see here, Carla Johnson needs you to sign listing agreement XYZ. Okay, and this is what it looks like. It will say that she shared a document with me. This is where my message to the client will be. So depending on how long it is or what you type in there, they can read all that information before going into the signature program, and click View Document. It will take me to a client view. And again, this is the same as you would receive as an agent if you were receiving a copy to view or even to sign. And they can easily walk through the document and it will instruct them on where to sign. So I can click Start Signing, click here. And again, it will ask me to adopt a signature. As a client, I can adopt it and sign. It's a very simple process. And again, most of the signature programs work this way. Once I click the Finish Signing, typically it will ask you to sign up for an account. Your client doesn't have to do that. They can still receive a copy. And as the agent, if I were to go back to that, and I'm gonna have to log in again because it's kicked me out because I'm on the same computer. So I will navigate back to that really quickly. And I can see here that I've received a notification. So that now has been signed. Whereas before, it showed me that it was pending signature. So now if I were to click on that document and enter it, I can see that it has been completed. So that is a really great way to keep abreast of what's going on with that document. I believe, Carla, and you'll have to answer that for me, you also as the agent receive a notification when the document has been signed.
Yes, I do.
Awesome. And that comes via email, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. But you can also set it up. A lot of the programs have a mobile application that you can have on your phone, and I believe it will send you text message updates or notifications as well. So
I'm gonna have to go in there and change that. I didn't know about the text message notifications. That would be great.
Don't quote me on that, but I think they might have that ability to do the text message notification.
Yeah, I'll check it.
But I do know that they send you a notification just on your phone. If you were to look at the window, it would, populate on your screen there.
Mm-hmm. That would be great. Yeah, I'd love that.
It's a perfect thing to have if you were, out in the field and didn't have your computer in front of you, or you weren't able to access email. So that you know exactly when your client has completed a document or whatnot. So I hope that is helpful. And if there's anything else that I can kind of run through, Carla, let me know. Was there anything else that you can think of that?
No, I think you covered everything. I mean, that's an awesome job. You do a fantastic job. And keeping up with all these documents, sometimes you just don't know what document you need until you need it.
You're absolutely right.